Hello, I'm Tom from Big Tom Driving School. Just another video here. 3 things I want to cover. First one is to do with reversing, a very easy trap to fall into when you're practicing your reversing manoeuvres. I want to just give you a bit of a tip on that one. The second one is to think about how to help you when you just don't know what you should do in a given situation. You're driving along, something's cropping up and you're thinking, I just don't know what to do. I want to give you some practical advice about how to deal with that. And then the last one is trying to keep the training, the driving training that you're doing, meaningful to you so that you can actually assess situations that are cropping up and realizing how that's going to affect you, the consequences on you as a driver. So let's go over those 3 things then. The reversing, first of all. One of the things to remember with reversing is that if you reverse too fast, you inevitably either mess up with your observations to check that it's safe, or alternatively the position in the road. One of those 2 things, sometimes both of those things, can go out the window when literally the speed is too fast. In other words, the clutch is too high. So one thing I would just really try to give you as a practical tip is to be prepared to put the clutch down so that you can then do the turning round of the head to check that it's safe what you're trying to do. I know this is kind of goes against what you see maybe every day, but you know, ultimately, in order to make sure that when you're reversing it's safe, you've got to be able to do those observations. And in order to be able to do those observations, you've got to put the clutch down, because otherwise the car just keeps on going backwards, doesn't it? So it's really about, this tip is really about giving control back to you when you're in the process of doing your manoeuvres. Clutch down. Okay. When you're driving along and something's cropping up in front of you, the situation, and you're just thinking, God, I don't really know what I should do in this situation. One thing I want to do is take off this kind of onus of responsibility on your shoulders that says that somehow you've got to solve this problem, because very, very often, you know, you really aren't expected to. When you're driving along, let's say a 30-mile-an-hour road, and let's say you're doing 15 to 20 miles an hour, and up ahead in the distance you can see there's a parked car. There's parked cars, in fact, on both sides of the road. So technically nobody has got priority, do they? When that situation arises, no one's really got priority. And as you're bowling up closer to these parked cars on both sides of the road, you've slowed the car down. You might be in, I don't know, let's say 3rd gear. You might be doing, say, 15 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, 3rd gear, and you're bowling up to this, what is potentially a hazard, isn't it? Because you might need to give way. You're certainly going to need to at some point be moving over as well. So it is a potential hazard here that needs dealing with. My point is that if something does come around, whatever it might be, then why do you feel inclined to have to solve this problem for everybody? Oh, right, well, what I've got to do now is I've got to drive through. I've got to put myself right in between that bit there, because otherwise that's going to happen. And then you just wait there, and then let me do this, and I'm just going to force my way through here. Why do all of that? Why don't you just put the clutch down, brake, maybe consider a handbrake or not? But in other words, just pause for a few seconds and allow this situation to naturally unfold. You will find that the other oncoming vehicles, the drivers, will also be willing to get this sorted out. So everybody's got the same goal here, the same aim, is so that you can all get on your way. But my point is that you don't have a pressure on you to actually make that particular problem go away. And I think sometimes that's an important thing to say to you, is that you're not expected, when you're learning to drive, and even when you've initially passed your driving test, there isn't an expectation that you are now suddenly an expert in driving and can read all situations perfectly, and you know precisely what to do in any given situation. The learning curve continues, and as such you're still picking up experience, And so it is perfectly okay. In fact, it's more than okay to sometimes just pause and let someone else sort that out. That's too complicated for me to do. I'm not sure who's supposed to be given what did, and I'm sure that pedestrian isn't supposed to be, but I just don't really know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that all get sorted out, and it will. So that's what to do when you just don't know what to do, if you see what I mean. The last one is making stuff meaningful to you, or should I say, being able to appreciate the consequences of stuff that's coming up. And there's a few examples I would give on this. When you're on a dual carriageway and you've got a slip road, an entry slip road coming onto the dual carriageway, for sure you've got to be able to identify that is there, and therefore there is potential here for vehicles coming onto the slip road, coming onto the dual carriageway or motorway even. So therefore being able to identify that early so that you've recognised it's there and there is the potential for that and you're assessing it. Because one thing you might be mindful to do is to check your central mirror, check your right mirror and see what options you have available to you should that become necessary. Do I even have the option of being able to move to the right into another lane? Often, you know, it's not necessary. Often, if you read it properly and in good time, you can either come off the gas and a vehicle will come in front of you, or possibly even go on the gas and a vehicle tucks in behind you. But my point is that if you don't spot that, first of all, then you won't be, if you don't spot the entry slip road, then you won't be even anticipating the possibility of vehicles coming on. Another example is a bus at a bus stop. We come across this so often, don't we? Bus at a bus stop has got potential for moving off, and bus drivers do have an expectation of when they put that right signal on, the bus driver is expecting to be able to be moving off. They may have however many passengers on board. And so being able to look at that, see that for what it is, and that there is a potential for that driver to be moving off soon, you know, that will have consequences to you. Another one is when you're approaching you're driving down the road and up ahead are some traffic lights that all the time that you've been approaching so far, they've been green. And those traffic lights have got every possibility of changing. If it's to do with a junction where there's traffic coming in from different angles, then there's every possibility that those green lights might actually change, isn't there? Because they've been green all the time that you've seen them so far. And the longer the traffic light is green, you could argue, couldn't you, that the more the possibility of it going from green to amber. Well, that's a very real consequence that's looking possible, probable even, and right up ahead of you. So that's worth kind of being able to recognize that as well. The last one I would just give you as an example is this ability to be able to read the traffic signs and read the road markings and understand what that means to you in real terms, whether it be to do with roundabouts or any number of things that this could be to do with, destinations or locations, road names on the lanes, the arrows on the lanes, the stop lines, the keep clears, you know, there's loads when you start thinking about this, but it's real. They're there for a reason, and that is to be giving you the heads up that there is a necessity to know what that means for you personally. Because if you don't pay attention to these signs and you don't pay attention to these road markings, then the consequence of that is that you're going to find yourself in the wrong position, the wrong lane. I didn't realise I was in such and such a road. I didn't. I should have been in that exit. I've just missed that one. I mean, if it's still safe, then arguably what's the real harm in that? If you've managed to keep things safe, then no great shakes in the grand scheme of things. But by paying attention to those things, then you're helping yourself develop the skill of forward planning. Now, those four examples I just gave you there, if I'm saying those things to you and you're sort of like finding yourself, yeah, I have been in that situation before, yeah, I can actually relate to what he's banging on about there, then it's absolutely fine. It just means that there is a developmental need there to recognise that the learning to drive and in fact just driving in general, there are consequences to not really paying attention. If you're not paying attention and recognise and spotting things, these little clues, and what people are doing and how they're doing it and what's and this, that, and that, if you're not spotting all of that, then the consequence tends to be that things happen without you really knowing. Oh, I didn't. Oh dear, I didn't. Oh, and all of that sort of. In other words, it's all reactive. It's all after the event, and so there is a need. You know, I admit that this does come. This naturally improves with experience. I will say that, you know, the more experience you can get of these situations and how these things can develop, then that's brilliant, because that's giving you the opportunity to learn and read and anticipate. So that's great stuff. But, you know, sometimes what can happen is that maybe somebody's waiting for a driving instructor to tell them how to solve a problem, or just waiting for an instructor to sort everything out all the time. So not paying attention to really very much, because it doesn't really matter. If I make a mistake, then it's not really the end of the world, because, you know, my instructor's here, he or she can grab hold of the steering wheel, they can slam the brakes on, or the people around me, they can see the L plates, so you know, they should really be expecting me to make mistakes anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Well, you know, to a degree that's true, to a degree, but at the end of the day, there is a responsibility. It's a horrible word, but there is a responsibility that comes with driving on public roads, and part of that is trying to develop this ability to recognize what the potential consequences are for things that are happening all around you. It doesn't have to be just in front of you, it can be to the sides, it can be behind you, and because this is a practical skill, driving is a practical skill, then there are practical consequences as well, whether it be affecting other road users adversely, in other words making people angry, or whether it be to do with the position being wrong, which then makes people interrupts them in some way as to what they want to do because you're in the wrong position. It can be just to do with the comfort of your own passengers in your car. It can be to do with how you personally feel in yourself as you're driving along. You know, there's lots of different consequences that crop up as a result of this. So really, I would just encourage you to take that on board and see it for what it is, and recognize that there is a need to develop that and work towards getting that, so that you are making progress. No one's saying it's got to be perfect instantly, not in the slightest, but if you can begin to recognize what things are happening around you and what the consequences are there, it's a little bit like, what do they call it, cause and effect, isn't it? It's a little bit like that. Because of that, therefore I'm going to probably need to be doing that. Oh, because I've just spotted that, then I'm going to probably need to be doing that. And it's getting that relationship and firming up on that, so that ultimately you're doing that really independently. Okay, and so there are three things there that I brushed on in this video. One was to do with the reversing, and this idea of giving yourself time to actually make effective observations by putting the clutch down, taking that drive out of the reversing bit, putting the clutch down, that then gives you the time to do the observations, not just to make sure that it's safe, but also to make sure that you are accurate in terms of your position as well. If you fail to put the clutch down, if you keep the clutch up, then the car wants to continue going backwards, doesn't it? And it will do, and it will just want to keep going back and backwards. You can put on your brake, put the brakes on if you like, but if you don't stick that clutch down, if you just keep on braking, then eventually the car stalls because the car doesn't know what you want to do. If you want to pause, what you need to be able to do is put the clutch down followed by the brake, clutch fully down, followed by the brake. That then gives you the time to make those observations, and then you can carry on really with the clutch, finding the bite again. The second bit was recognizing that you're not expected to sort everything out for everybody, that when you're driving around, sometimes there are just things that are going to happen in front of you, and you're just going to look at it and go, wow, what is going on here? Surely that shouldn't be, and why is that? And I don't know. And when that happens, that's absolutely fine. You just literally, you spot what's going on there. You may not feel brilliant about it, and so therefore you think to yourself, I need to buy myself some time. How do I buy myself some time in those kind of situations? Take the drive out of the car, put the clutch down, just pause for a second, just realize what's going on. Naturally, these things unfold. And then the last one was just to appreciate that there are consequences. This is a practical skill, no different to if you were learning how to ski or some other practical sport. Then there's techniques that need to be learned, and there are consequences to when things go wrong. And it's trying to be able to develop that sense of, well, because of such and such, I'm probably going to need to be doing such and such, and taking on that responsibility for yourself. I hope that's useful anyway. Okay, cheers.